Hello everyone and welcome to Political Paradigm. I'm Terry Ikumi. Today my guest is the presidential candidate of the Action Alliance, Major Maj Al-Mustapha, retired. Welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Before we go into the details of your campaigns and to talk about the elections generally, let me point you to something more recent, and that's the budget presentation by the president. 20.51 trillion naira is the budget presented by the president to the National Assembly. Likely that figure will increase. If you become president in 2023, that's the budget which you will be working with. What are your thoughts on it?
Numerous things comes to mind. First of all, I have been following this country for decades and looking at numerous genesis that is retarding Nigeria. Some of the issues some of us will come up with might not be palatable in the ears of some, but definitely it is in the best interest of Nigeria. If you are seeking for governance, realism, truths or facts in your hands are what you should be seen to work for or with for the common good of Nigerians. There is something called dirty budget politics. In countries earmarked to either be retarded or be destroyed. Looking at the journey so far, there are numerous things people have not been talking about. And in Nigeria, evidently as it is, Nigeria has been targeted for decades, never to grow. We shall re-examine the contents, the figures, and the implementation. Here, I have seen and I listened to the summary, and we are still studying it. But to me, there is so much to be desired, and when time comes, if God Almighty bestow upon us the opportunity to preside over Nigeria, we will be very scientific, we will be very prudent, we will also be seen to be very strategic in looking at budget. You know, budget anticipatory measures from capital and recurrent, there are numerous politics involved. If you take, for example, 2022 budget, and you look at from January to this year, in retrospect, and look at the performance of the budget, you have so many big question marks from the institutions that you have, and then from what it is earmarked for Nigeria, you have a lot of big question marks. So it was decades and decades past. And to us, this country deserves much more in terms of budget implementation. It is one very hard nut to break, but we have the know-how. We look at duplications and waste in spending, and we look at figures that never add up, and we look at the foolishness with which the executive arm of government is in most cases abused, where misrepresentation of facts and figures are presented, where performance of budgets are given in terms of percentages. If it is given in quota A, when quota B comes and you add it up, you might not end up seeing the same thing. So we have been particular in looking at it with eagle eyes to be able to know what the budget was meant for, its conception, preparation, and to the stage of implementation lies a headload for us to understand and to know that there are games. Once we come, we shall not continue with what we meet. And I'm not coming to say because...
So you would review the budget when you come in?
Definitely, there are things we know, and there are things we will bring to the fore. I will tell you this. If you examine Nigeria today, the presidency, the executive arm of government, and indeed the legislature are saddled with two major problems. One, institutional failure. So when you have institutions that do not function, you do not have actually the right figures you desire to have for the country to work with. Dirty budget politics is a scheme where some certain foreign hands are involved, where investors who do not care about your country comes to the fore, where ideas that are just there for the sake of it, fiction, also comes in. That's why if you, for example, take, say, 2021's budget and look at it from today, and re-examine it from Nigeria's point of view. You will be ashamed and you'll be worried about the percentages that got to be implemented. And that's the worry we have. So at the end of the day, you are busy rather than implementing a budget with an excellent intention, with a good vision. But at the end of the day, what you are doing is working backward. Now, promoting inflation, creating more hardship to your people, killing your currency, and promoting your enemies who are sitting elsewhere, and then having a budget that is performing for themselves. You are having institutions that are duplicated. We have done quite a hell lot of work on this in knowing where we are as Nigerians. Maybe this is strange to hear from me. Maybe other people have not done, but we spend so many years working in knowing what the budget is all for, and that's how we got to know the scheme called dirty budget politics having its way in Nigeria.
You know, the implementation of the budget, as you mentioned, is quite important. If you look at the 2023 proposed budget,
right.
Capital expenditure is just about 5-point-something trillion.
Right.
And the budget has a deficit of 11 trillion.
Right.
So when you look at that, many would question what impact 5.3 trillion naira would have on the population, especially because releases for capital budgets in the past years have not been up to par.
Right.
We've almost not had 100% release across board.
Right.
But with a deficit of 11.1 trillion naira, put side by side with a capital expenditure of 5.3,
right.
would you borrow to fund this budget?
No, I will not borrow.
So how would you get the financing?
Very good, and I thank you so much for this question. To tell you the enormous work we have done. First of all, the previous budgets, in our investigations, looking at it in retrospect, has presented to us duplications and waste. Waste of resources, waste in terms of servicing structures that are duplicated from numerous ministries. And these are the ones managing the economy. They are in the major ministries, and there are numerous of such that are there. Some came to the fore when the MDGs and the rest were created. So it became an avenue where budgets are meant for tiny little cells with 4 or 5 people. You see 80, 50, 90, 100 plus billions being budgeted for those. But if you sit down and look at what it is budgeted for, and look at the major department in other major ministries, you can understand the colossal waste going on. And people have enjoyed it, and it is going on. Keep that aside. The issue of wealth creation from outside Nigeria is something new to Nigeria's mainstream understanding in governance. The issue of also curtailing waste and creating resources from at home. Let me give you a tiny little example. God has blessed you with gas. Also, in the process of taking it, your environment is by the day, being destroyed. But this destruction, these seeming deaths, if we sit down and look at international market, if we have bothered to do an investigation in knowing what it is at the international scene, there are numerous openings in the world who are desirous of what you consider as debts. We take 11% out of your gas deposit. That you have, the small one. We're not talking about the major 3.176 trillion. No, from what you have alone. For you to be able to augment, get your structures adjusted, get people to be accountable, and get institutions to be functional, you can draw from out of a certain arithmetic we have done. 11% of what you have is going to create $201 billion. As at June this year, every state can boast of itself, and you can have all the industries you have. You can have employment. Employment issue will be a bygone thing, because there will be, all industries can come. What we are talking about is making Nigeria to be productive, to be seen to be exporting rather than importing. And we have all it takes to be. We have all it takes to be the world market.
So that's like a long-term goal.
No.
With regard to funding this 2023 budget, which
Correct.
you say
Yes.
that you will not borrow for.
Right, we will not.
Where will you get the fund in such a short time?
Already, I have just told you about 11% of something that is already here. The market is already there. It's a matter of negotiation. In terms of week, it is done. Remember, we're also going to curtail so much from the West that we knew of from the previous budgets. Add it up all together, then definitely we are going to have resources to utilize in pulling Nigeria, pending when the international negotiations is done. 1 month, 2 months.
Let me take you to something else that's contained in the budgets.
Right.
As its own measure to address the ASU issue.
Right.
The president has proposed 470 billion naira in the 2023 budget.
Right.
But he goes further to say that government cannot alone fund education, and he believes that we should find more lasting ways to address this issue once and for all. Do you have an idea
of
how that can be solved?
I have. I'm going to give you a tiny little example. Some of the things bedeviling Nigeria today is security. The insecurity in Nigeria is not born out of social problems only. Then the question here is, for example, why Boko Haram? Who created Boko Haram? When was it created? 22 years plus today, from 1st November 1999. What was the reason? Solid mineral resources. What is there? Rare stones. One of the most precious stones on earth. What is the quantity in Nigeria? Where is it located? Is the market available? The fact that you have precious stones in your land, you have enough money. Let's assume Boko Haram has, for the 22 years, the countries involved, I'm being bold to say so, that there are countries involved who created Boko Haram, diverted the attention of Nigerians and the leadership of Nigeria, inflicted maximum punishment in killing men, women, killing Muslims and Christians, putting all the bombs from all the records we have seen so far, shamefully. But I tell you, the aim of it is to take our resources, and I have evidence to show. We've been there. We've been to the Francophone countries between our borders and where these things are laid, looking at Borno State, looking at Bauchi, looking at part of Yobe State, looking at Adamawa, looking at Gombe. Now, looking at Nigeria from Francophone countries, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, for example, in that plank, the 1,864 kilometers in our borders, if you examine the happenings here, the stories created, and the happenings from the other end, and the movement in terms of excavation, that is colossal amount of money in hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. And here we don't have. We even scavenge to look for money to run an operation for us to bring security from where resources of Nigeria are taken away. Is, for example, they are taking away 100, and you are busy looking for a kobo to be able to maintain yourself. Well, you have hundreds of that going away. So this aside, the fact that we have also taken the pains to go around the world to know these precious resources have markets. And in the international markets, there are numerous bilateral or diplomatic economic movement or energy that can bring resources to you in your country, then Nigeria ought not to be where it is. Let's assume the precious stone, the rare stones has finished. Look at the global business games going on today. Look at the richest man on earth. What's his background? Lithium. In all the 19 northern states, you have lithium. There are 6 southern states where you have lithium. And the market is readily available. Let's take one of the poorest states. Let's take Kebbi State. You have the worth of what is known to be in Kebbi State is 318 billion as at today's price. As at last month, 318 billion worth deposited. Kebbi State, Kebbi don't have any economic plan. They have nothing to fall back to other than agriculture.
So this is a subnational problem more than a federal problem, isn't it?
Yes, now first of all, that's why I always say, we don't know who we are. We don't know what we have. And then today, you cannot say, I'm running a country on daily routine or yearly routines. Where is our economic target? What do we want to achieve? From now to 50 years, what is Nigeria's direction? The compass shows nothing other than daily routines. There is nothing as damaging as returning to a country seeing itself from a budget that comes year by year. Meaning, you have subjected yourself to those who initiated the doctrine and concept, concept of what is called dirty budget politics. Dirty budget politics.
I don't want you to lose.
It's a weapon.
Sorry, I don't want you to lose focus of the question.
Right.
The question is, a lasting solution to funding education in the country beyond the federal government?
That's what I'm telling you. All I'm telling you is revenue, wealth creation from home. Wealth creation to augment that. From what Kebbi State alone has. If you can say, let's assume even that's all the country has. But besides, I told you, all the 19 northern states have deposit of that. So you can now sit down and have an agreement in the same way we have had before on oil. Add in a quota to take care of a particular issue from all our productions by the day. Dedicate this amount to that. You, by now, as a country, on strategic terms, we're supposed to be looking at our education from now to 100 years plan. And you have all it takes to be dedicated, have the money, dedicated accounts, be involved in international trades. The money is evolving. You are making more money than that. For example, ASU in itself, it is established. You cannot do without them. Since they govern, the question is, if it is a body that you care for, why can't you give them oil allocations? Why can't you give them mining allocations? The accounts is to be monitored, dedicated, and controlled by government. The amount coming from there, the excesses coming from us, you do. Part of it you now do to manage your economy. There are 10 million and 10 ways to do. See, tying yourself to yesterday's routines, because it was introduced by whatever previous governments before, to say that unless you do it this way, nothing works.
But does this go to say that you stand with ASU and you fault the federal government's handling of the situation, especially with the recent registration of new education bodies to sort of counter ASU and the compulsion, especially from the federal government that took ASU to court to return to the classrooms?
My brother, leadership provision is called sacrifice. It is not that fanfare. When the whole world, the whole country, you as a leader, you have no right to now present your anger or promote your personal desire or ego to the fore. You are a manager, you are a provider, you are the one that is the torchbearer that beams your flashes of light against obstacles laid against the country. You are to carry all along. You have the patience, you have the qualities, you have the ability and the capacity, that's why you are given. But if you now come to be behaving like those you are leading, then it shows that you are not fit to be there. All I'm saying is the institutions or the ministries responsible for this should understand doing in-depth homework is incumbent upon them. If you cannot do in-depth homework to carry people along, you are misrepresenting the government. If ASU, also on the other hand, don't have anybody who interacts with them, failure number one. ASU is also, if they are also one-way traffic from the hardship they see, then there is also to say that there are no gaps in terms of interactions between themselves, NUJ and Ministry of Education. Ministry of Labor and them, there is supposed to be synergy prior to them meeting together. In any matter in life, take note of this. There is one point called common grounds. In common grounds and in national interest, from patriotism, there are some certain percentages or points of agreement. You see, agree, and disperse. Intellectually, if God gives you the mind, is to sit down and look at your sum totality of who you are and what you have. There are solutions that are in abundance. That's why I am worried to say, why must you be seen to be stereotyped, to be seen to copy yesterday's ways? A government that is not ready to create wealth, that is not ready to be innovative, is not a government that is ready to provide.
Maj Al-Mustapha, it would seem that you are very much interested in education development. It would almost seem as though you have the blueprint.
Right.
But many would want to question, based on history in this country, Nigerians would want to question why they would trust you with education, considering your educational qualification as well. You have the first school living certificates, the WAEC, and the NDAC, which I believe is the defense certification. So when you speak about addressing education up to tertiary level, what sort of trust should Nigeria have in someone like you who does not have that qualification himself?
I have. The fact that I have not presented that to INEC, it doesn't mean that I don't have. I have been building myself to be in prison. You know the number of higher courses I have done? To me, who is an intellectual? An intellectual is not a PhD holder. An intellectual is him who is by the day running and flowing with the wind of education, who is also running with time. And if you are running with the moon in terms of education, that is an intellectual. But if you have the PhD, you have papers. You have qualification that is just a carbon papers you kept. But you are running with the system and getting to know what the whole world is all about. You are creative and innovative. And looking at my background, with all sense of humility, I don't think there is any, with all sense of humility, any professor in any of these fields, forget security, that can come and look at me as somebody who doesn't know. Besides, remember, I have been part and parcel of Nigeria's governance for decades, and I have known these problems. So there are numerous evolution of numerous ideas, and you may be amazed to know that there are numerous ideas in our education sector that came from us.
Let's tilt away slightly for at least for a while,
right,
from some of these issues and talk about politics and your personal history. It would seem that you would spend a great percentage of your time during this campaign trying to change a narrative. The average Nigerian has a perception of you based on your history with former head of state, Sani Abacha. And as you try to transition from the military to civilian rule, are you concerned about how you are perceived going into the election?
I'm not concerned. Ask me why.
Why?
I'm a victim of perception or effect of propaganda over a period of time. The me that you see is the me that was. My records, I have served in Nigeria. We created numerous things for Nigeria, and record speaks. I have suffered from propaganda for a period of 15 years with torture, trying to just call me a bad name. I mean, trying to give me a bad name. The essence was for me not to survive. You know, last 2 years, in the year 2019, that was when we discovered last there were 18 attempts to kill me, approved. As of 2013, when I came out, I was aware of 11 attempts with the authority to kill me, because the essence of the game then was every blessed day, papers were paid, news magazines, whatever they write in the evening, by morning, radios and television will echo, just to give me that bad name so that there will be justification in killing me. And numerous events happen. I have not talked about that yet. The name they gave me is different, but the me that was is the me that is. And my background speaks for itself in terms of building this country, from my great-grandparents and what they did to Nigeria and what we are doing in building Nigeria ourselves. So power comes from God Almighty. Power is determined by God Almighty. Everybody has his individual, there is a collective destiny. If it is incumbent upon us, we are sure. We know who we are. We are facing the people with that sincere and clear mind to provide leadership that is totally different, because we are going to demarcate from numerous routines in Nigeria.
You have quite a lot of negatives attached to your name, and I think that going into the elections, you have a lot of work to do. I say that because attached to your name are murder allegations, alleged murder allegations, which would include former Vice President Olusegun Obasanjo. And then there are also concerns of drug trafficking allegations as well. How do you intend to address some of these things? Because you say that you are a victim.
I thank you for this question. First of all, the issue of murder. I faced 14 judges in 15 years, and that has been cleared. And there is no iota of it. People were contracted, the likes of Rogers, Juan Abdul Katako, were paid money, and they were taught what to say. They confessed that in a court of law. The fact that the media were denied to capture that is another thing. But we have the court documents in our hands. All we are waiting for is for the Supreme Court now. Supreme Court to now give a certain ruling so that we can now unveil all these documents for the world to see. It was a calculated game to now tarnish our names just to kill us. Why were they ready to kill me? It's simply because of what I know. I found myself in a position where I refused to compromise Nigeria. And that refusal to compromise presented me as an enemy. And I'm the last person that will compromise Nigeria's well-being and welfare. That aside, the issue of drugs, nobody ever alleged anything to do with drugs in my life. Nobody. There was a magazine called Rezo Magazine at one particular point in time in 1999 after Abacha died, some people who believed that I refused them to take Nigeria's money after handing over Abacha's government, now went to Rezo magazine and rated me as the 6th richest African with $600 billion. Does that make sense? But it was in that magazine. And then that's why they said he must be trafficking in drugs. Otherwise, he cannot be the 6th richest African. I don't have money. I've never stolen 10 naira. I challenged 2 governments. Challenged Abdulsalam Abubakar's government. I challenged Obasanjo's government on that. I was ransacked by bigger international investigative agencies, police. My eyes and thumbprints were taken around the whole world. They saw nothing. But rather than telling the whole world my clean bill records, they still kept it aside. So the disservice they have done, and the fact that I'm alive, I thank God Almighty. The fact that God Almighty has allowed me to come to the fore in itself is a big blessing that I'm thankful to God Almighty for.
You know, this is a very sensitive matter going into the elections, because the perception, the narrative that was pushed out there was that you're a man to be feared. And while you try to clear that up, there are also allegations of coup attempts. And it would raise the question, why should Nigerians trust you with their democracy if you had attempted coups?
I tell you this. Let Gani Fawahimi when he was alive, and let Dr. Fashion were sold an idea to believe that I was in prison. And even in that prison, only 5 of us were given the worst restriction in that prison. We were allowed to see only 5 people in a day with passport-size photographs, with with addresses, telephone numbers, location of the person, signing and thumbprinting, and giving copies to SSS and all other security agencies. These are the only ones we were entitled to. But the worst armed robber in that prison was entitled to as many visitors as time permits. We don't even have, with all the services we render to Nigeria. The essence is to keep people away from us, correct? So here, with all the restrictions while we were there, not being allowed to see people, including our families with difficulties, seeing our lawyers, in most cases because court has allowed our lawyers should have access to us. Even lawyers have restrictions coming. There are many senior SANs involved. I know how much they suffer to have access to us, to talk to us on our rights. But yet, it was on such a situation that they now woke up and say, Mustapha was planning a coup. I was just arrested. I faced a panel, and I faced them one time. I was charged in 15 years. I was charged for coup 5 times. And in one of the sittings, I asked the panel, I looked at all of them, I said, who are those am I staging coup with? What are the names of the spirit? Because there was a time I was underground on solitary detention. But in Nigeria, all magazines and papers have written that Mustapha was staging a coup. And I was brought before a panel. Well, to cut it short, the members of this particular one that I'm talking to you about, one by one, they exonerated themselves and told me that they were told to incriminate me. These are very senior people in the society today. So there was game for them to retard me. To tarnish my name and my image. They have done it. How is coup conceived? How is coup done? But they have done it, and people believed what they saw. So at the end of the day, I am here. If I were to be afraid, if there were iota of me being involved in a coup yesterday, or the drugs you talked about yesterday, how come I'm here? How come I go to Nigeria from north to south, everywhere free? I drive myself alone. I go to anywhere alone. I have nothing to hide. There is nobody who will tell you I have cheated him or harmed him.
Have you gone past whatever you went through for 15 years? Have you healed from it?
Healing from it? It takes a long time to.
So you require that therapy.
Let me tell you. The fact that I was the firstborn of my parents, and the fact that we are not at war, and the fact that Nigeria was not divided, in 15 years, a serving military officer being treated like an animal every day, in chains, hands, leg, and neck. I was in solitary detention for 5 years, 2 months. My parents were only allowed to see me twice in 15 years. And when they finally got my freedom, God willing, I came and met an empty home. They were not there. You know the pains of that? I'm their best friend. You know what this psychological impact has? Yet, we always look unto God Almighty in what we say and what we do. And I have forgiven those who did. Ask me why.
Why?
Every person in life, whether you know it or you don't know it, you are on trial. If you have freedom, you're on trial. If you lost freedom, you're on trial. If you're a rich man, you're on trial. If you're a poor person, you're on trial. If you're a leader, you're on trial. If you are being led, you're on trial. Any single thing. You are questioning me here. You're on trial because you have the initiative here. I'm on trial because I'm responding to your questions. And that is life. So the fact that it is God who permitted the trial in itself, I look unto God. I don't know what he desires to achieve. I know what he wants to do with me. So all I have to do is turn unto God alone. But those who persecuted me themselves, I wish and I pray they will now have the opportunity to come to the fore. Look at themselves, look at their ages, and look at what they have done, knowing fully well that I have forgiven them. I want them to come to the fore and tell the world the truth. That's all I want.
Will that help with your healing process?
Not my healing process. It will educate Nigeria.
Well, have you healed?
I am, because I trust in God Almighty.
So here's why I asked the question about healing. Yes. Should you become president in 2023, Nigerians would want to know where the line will be drawn between actually fighting perhaps those who are involved in corrupt practices and vengeance.
No. For me, the very moment I stepped out of prison, the media who covered my stepping out of the prison staff, family, many numerous well-wishers knew the first thing I did. I stopped. I prayed for those who persecuted me, those who wrote all the lies against me, those who subjected me to punishments, those who believed that their punishments also will not allow me to be seen to be a normal person because of the nature of the punishment. I pray for God Almighty's forgiveness upon them and peace on Nigeria, and for God Almighty to give us the wisdom to continue to be. You can ask your colleagues, I did that. But it's a Herculean thing to do. I have done, and I have no reason to look back. I'm bigger than that.
Yeah, it's very important for the country because in trying to move the country forward, we cannot be dragged backwards.
Vengeance is not my own, is not my upbringing, is not in my religion, is not in my belief. Love, affection. I have been an advocate, and as I have been conversing all across the issue of peace, unity in Nigeria, even as a very little toddler in the military as a lieutenant, numerous youth associations were created or registered by me. And I brought them up in this sense. That's why today, if there is trouble in the South, I can easily move to those associations and those people, the elders and the youth, I can talk to them. I move to any part in the North, and I have been doing that. And this country, numerous youth associations can attest to this. I have been doing this and sung, and I'm not seeking for reward or to be eulogized before the media. God has seen and known what I have been doing. And there are numerous of such associations I personally registered, and they are the ones that are providing unity in Nigeria today.
It would seem that that's suggesting that you have your basis in the South. But we will come to that. Now, what we see, especially since the return to democracy, is former military officers transitioning from the military to civilian rule. So my question is, in a democracy, what does a former military officer have to offer?
Democracy, a military officer is trained to be versatile, and it all depends on the strength of that person. It is personality evaluation issue. If you believe from the open programs that brought you up as a versatile person, primarily what is required, leadership qualities in an individual. The fact that Mr. A, as a civilian, comes to say, I am a politician and I am promoting politics and I want to be in politics, it doesn't mean he possesses the qualities of leadership desirous of this country that can have an impact in changing the country. But a military officer might have the qualities, and I'm not saying all the military officers have all the leadership qualities. Leadership qualities are numerous against what you see in many textbooks today, from 17 to 18 and the rest. I found myself in detention, and out of the difficulties of solitary detention, lately I came up with 46 strange qualities of leadership, and I'm writing on that. I have given that to one of the institutions in UK on leadership, and they are working on it because I'm a graduate of that school since I came out.
All right, so you know it is no secret that Nigerian politics is largely money-driven. Now, in 15 years, in jail,
right,
a prison, as you like to call it. It was reported that you lost everything and
Yes.
had to come out to start afresh.
Correct.
Now you're running for president.
Correct.
How are you able to survive, or how were you able to survive this entire time, and how do you intend to fund your campaign?
We believe we have invested too much in interactions, in collaborative activities yesterday, today, and tomorrow. When it comes, we'll continue on our own passages. We continue to now understand that the goodwill we have established in Nigerians will continue to bring to us that confidence of support that is coming to us. Already, for the journey thus far, coming before the primaries to the primaries up to this point, is not me. It's our friends and brothers displaying goodwill. Even my coming here is goodwill. I didn't drive myself here. I am brought.
Let me draw your attention to something. You're quoted to have said that what Nigeria needs now is leadership.
Correct.
We have to get out of where we are, and people will come and use the name of religion to say because he's a Muslim, he cannot be this, because he's a Christian, he cannot be this. So my question to you is that from what you say in the political atmosphere, do you fear that religion could be a factor in the 2023 presidential election?
Yeah, definitely.
Why do you
I
say
fear.
so?
Ask me why. See, at every given time in the life of a country, there are seasons. When the season demands that you are not up to that point where leaning on a particular religion might bring friction or suspicion, or build mutual suspicion from even within your party and without, then the question is, sit down at the beginning and do what is called templating and determine your go areas and no-go areas in the interest of the country, in the interest of peace and security, in the interest of acceptance of the country. Anything that will bring friction in your journey to leadership is called no-go area, avoid it. That is maturity, that is understanding the country. Where you become insensitive to the feelings and understanding of the people, then definitely it shows when tomorrow comes and you are settled with leadership. A leader, though, is expected to take tough decisions for on behalf of the people. Decisions might not be popular, but religion, ethnic issues cannot be seen to be played with. And if for whatever reason you have to go that way, then you have to spend a lot of time to educate, to make presentations to all segments of the society. You carry religious leaders of both sides, you carry ethnic groups of both sides, you carry national stakeholders on both sides, and say, for these reasons, this is the way I'm going. Please guide me. That's why I tell you, we are making visitations to tap from the tower of wisdom and knowledge of our elders without fanfare.
Let me ask you this question, which is related to that and the 2023 general elections. As I have done with other presidential candidates, I'd like to draw your attention to the peace accord which you signed, and question whether you believe that it will have an impact on the elections next year.
Yes, it will have. The fact, see, intermittent interactions minus peace accord alone, intermittent interaction, the fact that all candidates met together and shook hands is a big plus. You have seen the chemistry. We interacted with one another. It was at that point I saw some exchanging numbers. And the fact that you talk to candidate A, it is a tool to avert the unforeseens of tomorrow. So to me, there should be larger forums where candidates and their running mates and their party chairmen can come together to begin to talk on something called the Nigerian project. We are brothers and sisters. The fact that we are in different parties, it doesn't mean. The fact that we are looking for leadership of Nigeria, it doesn't mean we should be seen to be preparing for war. That is shallow-mindedness. That is disservice. If preparing for election is to prepare for war, that is an action left for animal kingdom, not for human beings who are civilized, who are cultured, who are respected. A country highly respected like Nigeria, where we should come and know that it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how poor you are. When the opportunity comes your way, destiny is rolling. And at the end of the day, somebody must emerge. And when he comes, in understanding God Almighty and knowing that he determines tomorrow, when it comes, thank God Almighty, key in with the person. Show your loyalty to the country by supporting the person or the leadership of the day. That is the way we see Nigeria, and we are advocates of peace in this direction. We are building patriotism to embellish that, so that we are enveloped by patriotism, fear of God Almighty, and looking at the motto of Nigeria, unity and faith, peace and progress. Anything outside these four, certainly there are people who are creating something. Once you see a person who loves himself more, who cares for himself, who thinks about himself, and nothing else outside that, he is a liability, he is a problem to leadership of your country.
Let's talk about something that I believe you're an expert in, security. Now, as a former chief security officer to a military head of state, why do you think that the security situation under civilian rule has worsened? And how will your experience come to bear if you become president?
It's a big question. It has simple answers. But every of the answers are bitter pills in the mouth and the soul of those who initiated our problems. The build-up and development of insurgency in Nigeria, and that is one peculiar thing that Nigerians ought to sit down and determine. Why was Nigeria having an insurgency problem? When was the build-up started? To achieve what? And if you allow the trend to continue, where is it taking your country to? The likes of those equating Nigeria with, I will tell you boldly, is Afghanistan and Congo DRC, then Nigeria. It is from the God-given resources, and you can never detach. Once you bring out honey in the open, you cannot complain of having flies. Nigeria's honey is in the open. Flies that are poisonous are all hanging around to fetch. They will end up contaminating it, and the owner might not use it properly. Insecurity in Nigeria, there are numerous approaches to contain it. I have spoken in numerous fora, and to say that there are peculiar ways of getting it done. And the way it is today, the present structures of your armed forces, of your Joint Intelligence Bureau of Nigeria, the way you have, the paramilitary you have established, cannot capture the scope of the wide front of the threat facing Nigeria, and that is clear. You have to sit down and look at Nigeria from north to south, from all the 6 zones of Nigeria, and understand that from your waters to the northern north, you understand that there are some special roles that must be seen to be governing Nigeria in providing effective security. That's one secret we have. From your river Niger to river Benue, from the roles and expected of you to do concerning security, from determining restructuring your ministries, including Ministry of Water Resources, leaving the ministerial status to now to come under security in terms of control of what is called movement security control in Nigeria, something new, in bringing technological support to the armed forces and to the new forces we intend to create. There are new forces that will man our shallow waters. There are additional roles for our Navy. There are additional roles for our military. There are additional roles away from police and from the military on the land. There are also special roles in your forestry, mountains, aerial view security, and your borders. There are technological deployment, working with physical in terms of your borders to the hinterland. We, people have forgotten, created the 6 zones of Nigeria. And people don't know why. And are not utilizing the reasons why we created the 6 zones. We created it, if you can remember. The reason is why. And it has to do with containment of the insurgency in itself and easier security management of Nigeria on one side, easier for administration, there's a reason for the 6 zones, easier for us to fall back to our history, to our culture yesterday, easier to understand that from the zones, Nigeria can, looking at agriculture, manage what is called dirty fertilizer politics so that you can now have maximum production against what we have today. You know, the type of fertilizer we have been using for the decades has chemicalized our soil. We have destroyed ourselves. We are not looking at that. You have a ministry, you have security apparatus, but we are not doing what we are doing. When tomorrow comes and you discover more money, then you realize that you have allowed liabilities come into the country and you can no longer feed yourselves. But we are moving on that direction. So Nigeria should be put on a template in every sector and get it dissected and create programs that will run concurrent. It's bigger than just the fanfare of coming to talk to do it. No, it's a Herculean thing. It's a serious labor work. It's a serious brain work. It's a serious mobilization of gifted people from numerous sections with effective management of all of them, so that every single month we'll have a quality time of management, of production, and of direction. Anything outside this, we are wasting time in providing leadership.
No, in the last 7 years,
right,
at least over 8 trillion naira has been budgeted for defense in this country. There's no corresponding result as far as analysis go. Now, as an intelligence expert, do you subscribe to the narrative that we have not funded our defense appropriately, or are these monies getting into the wrong pockets?
There are 2 answers to this. Evidently, at the beginning of the management of insurgency of Nigeria, it was a mixed security and political interest management, because we have done our homework. At the beginning, there were more negative stories of describing the threat, giving it a reason for why funds should now be released. But in this real sense of it, money released was meant for personal or political interests of some certain people. Most unfortunately, we have taken the pains to go back into that. We look at allegations by some people from even within the system then and say, whatever they said was wrong, now we should go back to look for answers. We have. And it is disturbing and most disheartening. Lives were lost of precious gallant officers, gallant soldiers who have perished out of desire to provide solutions. But they do not know the larger dirty politics governing what they did. Money was spent. So in a nutshell, because it's a long thing, the amount of money budgeted for, the result you have seen, is evaluated and known by everybody, including those involved. What here is all that matters is patriotism and the care to keep Nigeria in peace and intact. The money budgeted for, if it were to be from the structures I told you from, expanding the network, protecting your natural resources, getting the military to play its role, territorial integrity of Nigeria, then having some other segments who are effective, who are well equipped, who have a new doctrine governing every portion of Nigeria, will allow every Nigerian to crisscross Nigeria, to have data kept, to know what is called security data movement of every person, strangers and citizenry, all for the common good of people. But I tell you one thing, in Nigeria, there are 2 things I have seen. The desire to spend, given excuses for it, and the inability of the intellectuals to ask questions out of fear. On another hand, is Nigerians taking everything for granted because they do not want restrictions. The name of security, the other name of security is restrictions that you may not like for your common good, for the safety of your country, for the safety of your environment. And I tell you this, the intellectuals in Nigeria who are quick to condemn a government if they see security activities for their common good. There are types of security, passive and active. But when you get to most, let's say, all G7 countries, a Nigerian with whom you have just visited Nigerian airport and about to take off, you see rowdy sessions, you see shouting and arguments. You are on board that aircraft, but the moment they announce you to land in 5 minutes on that destination country, you will see Nigerians adjusting and complying. complying with order even before you land. And soon after you land, Nigerians will not see that rowdy session. They will not be fighting. They will queue. They will behave as a gentleman or a gentlewoman. The question you ask yourself is, why? Because the law works. Because that restriction that brought order is what we don't have.
We're almost out of time now, but since you really question the funding for the security agencies and where the monies go, should you become president tomorrow,
yes,
would you prosecute those whom you believe could be responsible for diverting the funds?
Once we get there, we will be driven by patriotism and love of peace and security in this country. The records we shall see will determine what we do. But we'll be driven by love of this country. We'll be driven by patriotism. I was in the military.
Just the question is more direct.
I know.
The reason why the question is direct
I also know.
No, just 1 second. The reason why that question is direct because there are concerns with regard to how we fight corruption and the importance of making sure that people who fail this country pay dearly for it. And those who, to a great extent, the people who are culpable of things like this are very highly placed.
Yes.
High in the military and high in the political space. How bold would you be to go after these people?
If you are talking of boldness, God willing, I'm not boasting. Boldness in rendering service for Nigeria was, first of all, what fetched the persecution I went through yesterday. Because I don't know how you can ask me to paint white black and to paint black white. Many of those who believed they hated my gods were the ones that punished me and called me names. In Nigeria, I believe the even institutions, the two of them primarily, managing our security, corruption issues in Nigeria are ill-equipped. They are too small. They are not organized properly. A situation, this is the way I see it, where you call a rabbit to be the chairman of arrested lions, you know, is semantics. The rabbit will be running around the animal kingdom, but the lion will be sleeping the way it wants, and nothing will happen. So we have an understanding of two new agencies to come on board, where it will swallow these two, and it is bigger. It will go along with our economy. In Nigeria, I give you this insight, even though I don't want to be given some certain leakages with the secrets we have for Nigeria. You don't have National Economic Intelligence Agency or a commission. You also do not have National Electronic Agency, a management of your economy and determining data of corruption in terms of management your domestic activities, international trade, movement of your resources, activities in your banks, activities with your central bank, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of National Planning, and in that understanding what they do with your resources you don't have. How come you don't have the seeming structures and you want to relate with the international community that you can now drive? Who do they communicate with? So once they come, they don't have relevant agencies they are working with. In today's modern world, how can you manage corruption? So you have to reset the country first. There is a lot of restructuring to do if we must contain security. I give you one last one. The issue of purchase of equipment. Companies are known, amount of money it was bought for, at what cost did it arrive in Nigeria, the age of the equipment, the authority that bought it, the connivance between agencies and arms are things we know. We have done a lot of investigations.
Even from the black market?
Yeah, even in the black market, there is what is called the hidden market.
I'd like to get your thoughts on June 12th being designated as the New Democracy Day. And this question is because of the history you share with late MKO Abiola for working for General Sani Abacha.
Correct. You must have heard numerous things I have talked about late Chief MKO Abiola. In political settings in a country, at every given seasons, or at every given season that came in the past, there are challenges before leadership. And when it comes, it is what the leadership determines of it that will come out of it. I believe till this moment until tomorrow, between late Chief MKO Abiola, General Abacha, General Abdulsalam Abubakar, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, the leadership of his party, there are so much that Nigerians don't know. I said this to an international community that came when he was in detention in 1995. I said it to them also when they returned in 1997. And we need to get this open. And that's why on numerous occasions, I gave him numerous things he wrote. Himself and I have discussed so many things. One of the greatest disservice done to Nigeria were those documents I gave him, a Quran, a Bible, and A4 papers, over almost 1.5 reams. He was writing things on a daily basis. Whosoever visited him, whatever happened to him, on one hand. On the issue of evaluating his involvement in politics, his businesses, his international contacts, were things he was keeping, and I was assisting him to keep. One of the saddest things is the fact that where were these things kept away from his family or from the domains for Nigerians to dissect? It's a very, very important thing. So to me, if a government has taken decision of eulogizing him and adopting a policy in now crowning his efforts with June 12th, yes, it's the decision of government of the day, and whosoever is in leadership occupies a position with information at hand with which they have taken decisions.
Major Maj Al-Mustapha, I'd like to thank you very much for this conversation. And like I would say to every presidential candidate that I speak with, I wish you well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure is mine as well.
Thank you.
Well, that's Political Paradigm. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to remind you that you can catch this episode and others on YouTube. Simply search Political Paradigm or go through the website, channelstv.com. I am Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.